The climatology syllabus for geography optional includes the topic called monsoons. Most of us are more familiar with preparing monsoons for paper 2, which is Indian monsoons, and also otherwise called as South Asian monsoon, as in SAM. And we do have some passing references to the temperate monsoons. So let me give you a brief outline of this topic. Monsoons, as we remember, there are some features. The climate is characterized by wind reversals. It's a feature of tropics and a feature of eastern tropical coast. It has strong seasonality of rains. There's a distinct dry season and a distinct rainy wet season. In India's case, almost 70 to 80% of rains are concentrated in the wet summer monsoon months, which is the rainy months of India. So this is what is monsoon. Now, although it's a feature of the tropics, we also have monsoonal tendencies in the temperate regions bordering the subtropical latitudes. Some referring to the Gulf of Mexico, referring to South China Sea, southern Japan. So we have tropical monsoons and we have temperate monsoons. Now, we are familiar with these terms. Temperate monsoons as the Gulf type of climate, and temperate monsoons also as the China type of climate. Southern China, southern Japan, and parts of South China Sea coast, that's China type of climate, and Florida, Alabama, parts of southern Texas, Gulf of Mexico coast becomes Gulf type of climate. In the tropical areas, we have monsoonal type of conditions at 5 locations. We have in South Asia, which is India and the countries alongside India and Indian Ocean coast. We have in Australia, a very narrow strip along the north, and along the coasts of Australia within the tropics. We have this along the Brazil coast, typically what's otherwise called as the marine type of climate, coast of Brazil. We have this along eastern coast of Africa, so right from parts of Mozambique through Tanzania, Kenya, Somalia, we have Djibouti. This is a narrow stretch where we have monsoon tendencies, and we have monsoons also along the Gulf of Guinea coast. We have got some countries here, the countries like Ghana, Togo, Sierra Leone, Liberia, Ivory Coast. So we have series of some countries here, which have the monsoonal tendencies. So tropical monsoons are typical of 5 regions. 5 regions including South Asia and Southeast Asian monsoons. Now, in the tropical monsoons, the monsoons which are along the Gulf of Guinea coast, we refer to those monsoons as pseudo monsoons. Pseudo as in false, not the best developed, and as a convention, your Savindra Singh textbook mentions this as the pseudo monsoons. Pseudo, why? Because of 2 reasons. One is, this is not the typical east coast that we know of. East coast is this side, east coast. The same for Australia, the same for Brazil, the same for South China Sea and Southeast Asia. This is not typically the eastern side. It is because of the configuration of the coast that we have monsoonal here. The second is, the seasonality isn't strong. This area, the monsoons during the winters is not typically dry and strong northeast monsoon winds. Why? Because this area has lot of impact of the equatorial type of climate. It is fairly humid throughout the year, so not really a distinct dry season like what we have in India, where we have offshore northeast trades. So we do have northeast trades, but they do not really result in dry conditions. The humidity is fairly high here. And the rainy season, the rains are not much. Your book tells us the rains are just about less than 30% of the total rains received by these countries. And by the time I move landwards, okay, it becomes progressively drier even when the winds are onshore winds during the summer monsoon. So why are they called as pseudo monsoons? Why? Because the location is not east coast like it otherwise it should have been. Why is it called pseudo monsoon? Because the rains during the rainy season of the summer monsoon, the rains are very less, just about 30% and less of the total rains, and by the time you move landwards, it becomes drastically less. And the third reason is because the winter dry season isn't well developed. The northeast trades which are coming out of the land, because this is the trade wind belt. I have got northeast trades and we have southeast trades. The northeast trades in the dry winter months, they do not really bring as much of dry conditions. Reason being, this area has impact of the equatorial type of climate. This is just about 12-15 degrees within the equator. Okay, so in this part it's fairly humid. Okay, if not heavy rains, it's fairly humid here. Because of these three conditions, we call this as pseudo monsoons. What's the mechanism here? Now, in the mechanism, this is the winters and this is the summers. During the summers, the ITCZ, this is the equator, equator 00, 23 and a half, Tropic of Cancer, Tropic of Capricorn. In the winters, in the summers of northern hemisphere, the belts have all shifted northwards. When the belts shift northwards, the subtropical high pressure of the southern hemisphere also shifts northwards, and the southeast trades now cross equator, deflect towards right and enter the coasts as onshore winds. Typically what we have as southwest monsoons for India. So for India also, the southeast trades, they cross equator and under Coriolis, they deflect and approach Indian peninsula as southwest monsoon. The same thing here. They have crossed the equator, deflect towards the land. But the problem is the stretch of water is not much. So they do not carry lot of moisture. In India's case, one big reason why we have as much rain is the stretch of water across the Bay of Bengal, across Arabian Sea. They pick up moisture and all that ultimately pours down as good rainfall in the rainy monsoon months. Here, the stretch is not much. It's Gulf of Guinea, no patch over Bay of Bengal or Arabian Sea types. That's why these winds, when they enter the coast as onshore winds, they're not really powerful, good rainy winds. And in the winters, when the ITC has shifted down, so you can see this, this is the ITCZ, this has moved further tropicwards. This is the ITCZ almost along the equator. In the summers, the ITCZ has gone northwards towards Tropic of Cancer. In the winters, it has shifted down. When it shifts down, the southeast trades are back in southern hemisphere. The northeast trades are now offshore winds along the Gulf of Guinea coast, but they are not really responsible for very dry conditions. Why? Because as I said, this is a typical equatorial type of effect, so lot of humidity in this region. So that's the mechanism operating for the Gulf of Guinea coast, and this reversal is monsoonal but with the variants and hence called as pseudo monsoons. Now we will refer to this from the textbook. I'm a big fan of reading the content from textbooks, but you have to be very careful as not to overdo this. That's why books like these are reference books. They're good for advanced readings, and such reference books should never be read thoroughly, completely, line by line. We do not have as much time for that. But some sections you should look up, which I am guiding you through your videos. So Savindra Singh, okay, climatology textbook, chapter number 7, and page number 131. It says pseudo monsoons, second column. I'll suggest you pause the video, get your textbook, and thereafter read and underline along with my discussion. So pseudo monsoon says areas of monsoonal tendencies or pseudo monsoons are found along southwest coast of Africa, including the coast of Guinea, Sierra Leone, Liberia and Ivory Coast, Eastern Africa and Western Madagascar. So to some extent, even this part does not have very well developed monsoons. Okay, because I've got Madagascar here and that impacts some amount of seasonality. Okay, but this is otherwise the best area of the pseudo monsoons. The coastal areas of west coast located between 15 to 20 latitudes. So this is that narrow zone. Like it says till 20, but I'm looking at 15, 17, 12. So not very far away beyond the tropics. It mentions the countries here where the summer monsoons are well marked, but winter monsoons are not well developed. During the northern summer, the subtropical high pressure shifts to the north of Tropic of Cancer in the northern hemisphere, while the southern subtropical high pressure shifts. Okay, it's north of Tropic of Capricorn. So in the summers, the subtropical high pressure of northern tropics has gone northward, and the subtropical high pressure of southern hemisphere also has gone northward. That's how I have shown it in summers here. It has shifted towards north and towards the north. So I repeat, it says that during the northern summer, the subtropical high pressure shifts to the north of Tropic of Cancer in the northern hemisphere, whereas southern subtropical high pressure is located to the north of Tropic of Capricorn. The northward shift of the subtropical high pressure pushes the southeast trade winds northwards, which after crossing over the equator become southwesterly due to Coriolis force and Ferrel's law. So as it has gone northward, the southeast trades have now crossed equator and turned because of the Coriolis force. It explains there. It picks up moisture in the rest. Now the same page 131, look at the last 6 lines. During the winter season, the western coast of Africa is dominated by surface trade winds. So in the winters, the cells are back, the pressure patterns are back, and now we have the regular trade winds, the regular northeast trades which are offshore. It says that during the winter season, the western coast of Africa is dominated by the surface northeast trades, and hence winters are dry because of tropical easterly blows over the land. Okay, but then you have one discussion before that. It says that it is not as dry. So page number 132, page 132, the second paragraph. Okay, look at the 6th, 7th line. According to R.J. Shorley and R.G. Barry, the monsoon rains in Nigeria contribute only 28% of the mean annual rainfall, while the remaining is from thunderstorms and disturbances. So here, the rains here are not so much because of onshore winds, it's more because of the tropical and equatorial latitudes. So the monsoons in this region do not really contribute a significant amount of rains. That's why we said we do not have a strong seasonality because of these winds shifting and reversing. So that's more or less this discussion on pseudo monsoons. Keep it handy for some jottings. You may be asked in paper 1, so make sure you have maybe 2 paragraphs, short diagram to discuss what are the different types of monsoons and a note on pseudo monsoons. Thank you.